So how do you reshape the world's biggest food company? When my next guest joined Nestle, he already had a reputation as a deal maker. Since taking charge in 2017, the company has bought and sold more than 50 businesses, exiting slow-growing consumer products, including confectionery in the U.S. As part of its ambition to become a global leader in food allergy treatments, it also recently spent $2.6 billion buying a company that tackles peanut allergies. Well, joining us this morning for an exclusive conversation is Mark Schneider, Chief Executive of Nestle. Mark, we're so grateful for the time you're giving us, so thank you so much for joining us this morning. If you look at what we've been through, the pandemic and COVID-19, how does it change the relationship we have with our food? Does it make us want to buy healthier foods? And so what does that mean for Nestle going forward?
Good morning, and thanks for having me. A great opportunity to update each other on what's going on. So clearly, the face of this pandemic has been changing over time, and shopping habits have been changing with it. Initially, there was a lot of concern about just keeping pantries stocked, and we saw a lot of pantry loading as consumers just wanted to be sure that there's enough food supply during the lockdown. I think over time we saw people were gaining confidence that shelves remained stocked and that the supply chains in food and beverage were resilient. We also saw quite a bit of initial demand for comfort foods. Clearly, this was a very stressful spring and early summer for many of us, and so comfort food was in high demand. At the same time, and I think this is now the longer-term trend that's playing out, there's a renewed interest in health and, in nutrition that advances health and strengthens the immune system. And I think this is here to stay, certainly throughout the later stages of this pandemic, and we believe also beyond that.
So, Mark Schneider, when you look at your unit, which is health and nutrition, how much can that grow? Is that going to be one of your best performing but also growing units in the next 5 years?
So our Nestle Health Science unit has been on a tear even before the pandemic. So a few years back, this was a 2 billion Swiss franc business. We expect to double this to about 4 billion by the end of next year. Very strong organic growth, especially in vitamins, minerals, and supplements. And then on top of that, I think very nice M&A opportunities that we utilized over time in the health-based nutrition area. And I think this acquisition of Aimmune, the tender offer here, is just the latest step here in implementing that strategy. And so over time, yes, this is going to be one of our key growth drivers and something we're proud of.
And so if you look at personalized subscriptions in terms of vitamins and things like that, how much will that grow? And are you seeing much more demand for products like that online? And will that continue once the pandemic is more dealt with?
Yes, so this is a category that lends itself to online business opportunity, and we've seen online demand skyrocketing. This was already, a growing sector before the crisis, but it clearly skyrocketed during the crisis because it made shopping so convenient. On top of that, you're absolutely right. I think personalized vitamins, minerals, and supplements are going to be the next frontier. We have some very exciting offerings underway. So you're moving away from just straightforward supplements like what I call the vitamin alphabet, like A, B, C, or D, and you're actually going to specifically what a certain individual requires. So initially there's some testing, there's a questionnaire, and then based on that you get exactly the vitamins, minerals, and supplements that are made for you.
So as that business is growing, Mark Schneider, does it mean that you'll cut down on processed foods?
Well, processed food is one of these misunderstood terms. When you cook, you're also processing food. So processed food per se is not a good or bad thing. It depends on what you do to the food. And I think overall, there has been a trend and something that we've been quite active on to really be sure that our food gets processed in a way that preserves the good and healthy ingredients, and that we're also using what we call kitchen cupboard ingredients. And that means to really simplify the label and be sure that these are ingredients that you recognize, that are natural, and that have a strong health track record.
In the UK, for example, Mark Schneider, a lot of the focus from the government is really on fighting obesity. So that also includes, certain advertising things when it comes to high fat or high sugar contents. What does that mean for certain Nestle products in the UK? Will you have to change them? Or, what kind of conversations are you having with the UK government about it?
Yeah, so we've been working very closely with the UK government, and to me, transparency is step one. So we were all across Europe, including the UK, we were in the forefront when it comes to food labeling and absolute transparency in that regard. So people should be knowing exactly what they eat and what the ingredients are and what the calorie count is. And then, of course, we are also a leader when it comes to restrictions, when it comes to marketing to children. And overall, going forward, informed choices to me is key. When it comes to food and beverage, it's one thing to have a very healthy offering, and you can count on us to have that in our lineup. But then on top of that, clearly, indulgent products are here to stay. The important thing is that with portion sizes and with the information you're giving, you allow people to make an informed choice and also nudge people towards a more responsible use of the more indulgent products.
Mark Schneider, when you look at some of the trends that we've been talking about for the last 5 years, there was a concern that it was the, smaller local brands that could have gotten market share from companies such as Nestle and some of your rivals. Does the pandemic actually reverse that trend because you have much better distribution, because you're accessible in certain places and have also that online capacity?
So during the pandemic, one phenomenon we've seen globally is that with consumers, there is a renewed interest in large, trusted brands. And this is nothing new. I think this also happened in earlier crises. People want to go back to choices that they know, that they trust, and that they know inside out. And so this crisis is no different. We've seen the same in 2008, 2009. Before that, I think we already have been able to slow down the onslaught of small to mid-sized companies in our space simply by becoming more innovative. I think what happened here, when you look back at the last 5 years, smaller companies were taking share from us because they were faster in addressing consumer needs. We have stepped up significantly our own innovation pipeline, and time to market has been shortened radically. And so even before the pandemic, I think we were able to slow down the loss in market share to some of the small, mid-sized players.
Nestle kind of reminded me this morning with a press release. It's U.S. National Cheeseburger Day, and you launched a plant-based cheeseburger. If we speak to you again in 5 years, how much of your revenue will be from plant-based foods?
We have not given precise revenue guidance, but we clearly indicated that this is an area that is strongly growing, strong, significant double-digit growth rates for several years now. I think this whole notion of plant-based alternative to meat and poultry and dairy and fish products, that has a huge runway ahead of itself. I think it addresses two key themes. One is consumers' interest in healthier diets, and at the same time, of course, environmental concerns, because the environmental footprint, and especially the carbon footprint of plant-based offerings, is so much better.
We talked also, Mark, a little bit before about the high sugar content products that the industry has. What will happen to your confectionery unit? Do you think it still has a place for Nestle, or will it be completely overhauled or reduced in the next couple of years?
We believe in the future promise of our confectionery business, and I think we've taken great strides in improving that. Having said that, even though it's confectionery, you can add healthier offerings, like, for example, our Yes snacking bars. And you can also go towards more premium offerings in smaller portion sizes. So I think there's growth opportunities. Clearly, confectionery and chocolate, they address sort of a deep human need, and they're going to be here to stay. It's more about, having a responsible offering in that space, and I think we've made very good progress.
There has been concern in the past about, some of the coffees and cocoa beans actually being harvested by children. I know you've taken steps to try and change that, or at least, for some of your offerings. Does that have an impact on consumers? Do consumers now want to make sure where these things are sourced so that, no harm is done to any child?
Look, this is a huge issue, and let me be very clear. Child labor has no space in our supply chain, and this is an area that we're deeply concerned about. I think consumers' interest in this area is absolutely justified, and we are all in favor of full transparency. I think we've taken great steps in our supply chains, both in cocoa and coffee, but also in some other commodities, to be sure that child labor is not in those supply chains. Having said that, for all the controls we're doing, violations will continue to occur. It's all about how vigilant you are about those and how stringent you are in your response about it. But we're totally unequivocal. This has no place in our supply chain.
Mark, talk to me a little bit about some of the trade tensions out there. We could talk about Brexit. We could talk about the U.S.-China trade tensions. Does it actually change your supply chains? Are you taking steps in case the UK leaves the EU without a deal come December?
So specifically when it comes to the end of the year, we recognize we have a primary responsibility to the UK consumer. As a result of that, of course, we are increasing our stock levels to be sure that even if it's a choppy departure of that, we leave clearly the consumer well supplied and, the shelves are stocked. That's a very important theme for us. Generally around the world, I think with some of these trade tensions and some of the geopolitical developments going on, you will see over time a slight shortening of the supply chains. I think long, complicated global supply chains are getting increasingly exposed. As it happened with Nestle, at a time when these long, complicated supply chains were very much in fashion and all the rage, we never went all the way. So to this day, we operate more than 400 manufacturing facilities around the globe. And we're taking pride in actually having a strong local commitment and mostly making products wherever we can in the markets where we sell. And so as a result of that, we feel somewhat less exposed. But even with the setup we have, we need to carefully check that we're not getting exposed here as either the pandemic or some geopolitical developments put pressure on us.
What can you tell us about climate change? I know, again, there are efforts which will probably have to be redoubled and even more in combating, climate change and making sure that a lot of the packaging is sustainable. What are you most excited about in terms of packaging that can actually, be recycled more or biodegradable?
I think at this early stage, it's important to leave no stone unturned. So whether it's biodegradable, paper-based products, or whether it's the advancement of recycling or reuse systems, for that matter, that avoid waste to begin with, we have to try everything. There is not one silver bullet. And I think what you're going to be seeing a few years from now is not one-size-fits-all solution, but rather something that is tailored to specific markets and climates. So, for example, in a hot and humid climate or when you have long distances, reuse systems may be harder to install. This is where the hygiene that comes from packaging actually does help with food safety. In some other markets where there's more population density and where the climate is more moderate, I think reuse systems will have an important role to play. And so what we're working on with our Institute of Packaging Sciences, and by the way, we're the only food company that runs an Institute of Packaging Sciences, we're trying to find the right solution for the right environment and then offer consumers a choice.
Mark Schneider, thank you so much for the time you gave us today. He is, of course, the Chief Executive of Nestle, and we hope to see you very soon.